ago now, I was but a baby actor in a community theater production of Dracula. Those of you laughing know exactly where I'm going with this story. At the time, I had been an actor for many, many years of my life. I remember as a very young child looking at my mother and seeing Laurence Olivier in Pride and Prejudice walking down a flight of stairs, and I went, "Mom, I do that." And in this production of Dracula, I found myself one afternoon railing very loudly against organized religion and how terrible it was for women and marginalized folks, particularly the LGBTQ community. And the gentleman playing Dracula, very lovely, tall, blonde man with big blue eyes, just listened and nodded his head at me. And when I finally stopped talking, I said, "So what do you do for work?" And he goes, "Oh, me? I'm a minister." And that's how I met Reverend Jason. Over the next 2 years, Reverend Jason would invite me on Facebook to various Sunday services. And it was always, "Come on, Casey, I think you'll really enjoy this sermon that I'm about to preach." And I went, "No, thank you." And he goes, "But Casey, we're not those kind of church people that I know you're afraid of. We're your people." And I went, "Ew. I don't have church people, gross." And this went on for 2 years. And it was never forced, it was never rude, it was never, "Hey, stop doing that." I know if I had said, "Please stop inviting me," he would have. I would just, "Oh, no, thank you, maybe another time." And after 2 years of this, there came a time where I really needed the invitation. But it wasn't the invitation to church that mattered. My partner at the time had just passed away from cancer. And at 28 years old, I had thought I had my entire life figured out. We wanted 2.5 kids and a couple dogs and a house in Huntington Beach. And suddenly, up in smoke, my entire future was gone. Everything that I wanted. Wanting to be an actor seemed like the least important thing in the world. And by the way, I had not been on an audition in over 5 years, so real hard to be an Oscar-winning actor that way. And I just didn't know what I was going to do. But I reached out to Jason and I said, "I need a grief group. Can you help me?" And he said, "Come on, I run one." And I sat through that grief group with 2 other women who had lost their partners within 5 years. And we cried together, and they held me in that space because it had been about a week and a half. And they said, "You're welcome here." I said, "Well, might as well go to church on Sunday then." And I sat there in the front row, just about where you are right about now, with my arms crossed over my chest, slouched as low as I could be. And Jason came over and he smiled and he said, "Casey, I am so glad you're here." And for the next year, I sat there in this place of what had been and what had not yet come to pass. It was in this really deep, dark, uncomfortable liminal space. And we've all had those spaces where we don't know what's happening next, but we don't know how to get there. But I was in a really unique place at the time. See, I tell people all the time, you don't come to church on a Sunday because you're bored. You come because there's something in your soul that calls you there. I was called to be held in care, and I was very lucky that the community I was attending, about 98% of them were fine with me being, quote, the girl with the dead boyfriend, because I kind of needed to be for a while, because I didn't know who I was anymore. But I was in a place where I could push myself and be held in those spaces to journey and to ask those really tough questions. What now? What next? Why me? What did I do that was so bad? What did he do that was so bad? Questions that we know we don't have answers for, and even if we did, they'd be pretty unsatisfactory. And a year of being in a place where I was not just held in that space, but encouraged to be in that space. I started to hear this little voice in the back of my head. So I started being a part of the worship. I remember Jason asking me one day, "You're an actor, why don't you come do the reading?" And the reading turned into being on the worship committee. And that turned into being the worship chair. And that turned into being on the board for like 3 years. And I remember sitting down while Jason was preaching one day, and I couldn't tell you now if you asked me what he was preaching about. But I remember looking out at everyone and thinking, man, if I could give just a little bit back to the world of what this community gave me, I will have done something really good with my time on this earth. At the end of the service, Jason pulled me aside and he goes, hey, no pressure or anything, but have you ever thought about going into the ministry? And I went, shh, I was thinking about it while you were preaching today. Get out of my head. And I was allowed into another space of discernment where Jason peopled alongside me. We did as much lay leadership as you could shake a stick at in 1 year. And at the end of that year, he looks at me and goes, so, you're applying for seminary, right? And I went, yeah, sure, you gonna help me pay for it? And he goes, don't worry, the money will come. And he was right. See, I had applied for graduate school in London 3 times and failed to get in 3 times. When I applied for Meadville Lombard, I got in within a week. And I went, oh, that's weird. Okay. But you know what? What's the worst that could happen? Oh, the worst that could happen is that, and I said this to Jason, Jason, I will be 32 when I finish seminary. And he went, yeah, and? And I went, that's really scary to go back to school. He goes, yeah, but aren't you going to be 32 anyway? You're right. And it was a little bit of bravery I got from that. Because I know Jason had been through the same thing not too long before, where his life had looked one way, and it was changing into something different. And what better person to people along a journey with than someone who's been on it before? The rest of a long, long story short, now I'm here. But I couldn't do it alone. See, when we talk about spiritual curiosity, especially in Unitarian Universalist spaces, we're asking people to do something really specific. Raise your hand for me if you know what I mean when I say the word discernment. Great. Some people hear the word discernment and go, huh? And saying it's thinking really hard about something isn't sufficient. When we talk about doing spiritual curiosity, we talk about that really deep soul work, those really hard, uncomfortable questions that we all like to pretend we're not asking, but we know we have to ask them. In one of my graduate textbooks we're using right now, it's a book called Another Way, Living and Leading on Purpose. And they talk about a theory called the care theory. And it's a way to help discern next steps, but it's a little bigger than that. And the steps they ask you to use are C, creating hospitable space. A, asking self-reflective questions. R, reflecting theologically, and I know that's kind of itchy for some people. And E, execute next steps faithfully. And boy, do I wish 10 years ago I had had that, because it would have made this process of discernment a little bit easier. But I was kind of doing it anyways, because I was with people like Jason, with the people at Fullerton UUC. Almost got those words mixed up. I had friends that were holding me in that space. They knew I was in a liminal space and no one could fix it, but we could be in those conversations together. I could be in a space like that because a created space of hospitality was made for me, really intentionally. I was allowed to ask those self-reflective questions and kind of had to because there was no other way out. Because I say there's no way around grief. You can't go over it, you can't go under it. Those of you who've been through grief know you've got to go through it. It's the only way to get on the other side. And then, of course, you have to reflect theologically. And when I say theologically, those are the big soul questions. The why me? Why did this happen? Those questions that we can't just answer alone, but we need to be held in a space like this to ask it faithfully. Executing the next most faithful step, I think, is my favorite, though. We don't have to have all the answers. I couldn't go from zero to minister overnight, although sometimes it kind of feels like I did. You have to be able to look at the options in front of you and say, what serves me best? For me, when it really came down to it, it wasn't about me, not at all, not really. I had to do the work, and I keep doing the work every day. But when I heard that little voice in the back of my head that said, what about ministry? It wasn't about what I wanted. It was about a gift that I could give, a way that I could be in community with other people. Yesterday was Pride in Santee, which is if you do not know, fairly conservative area of San Diego. We did get the bird flipped at us by someone yesterday as they drove by. So if that gives you a little bit of context of where I was. And one of my congregants was sitting next to me, and she said, you really did find your niche, didn't you? And I said, yeah, thank God. Because boy, did I not know what I was going to do with my life, and I really didn't. I had a degree that I wasn't using regularly. I worked a minimum wage at best job, and I just was kind of coasting. And I was becoming the person that you see in movies that you never want to be. And I had two options in front of me. I could stay the course. I could keep doing what I was doing and hope for the best and probably never move out of my parents' house. You're welcome, Mother. She's here today, by the way. Or I could be in a space where I could care, where people cared about me and said, but what if? What's the worst that could happen? So you apply for grad school and you don't get in. But what if you do? You finish the program and you apply for your first job, and what if you don't get hired? Okay, but what if you do? I tell people all the time, if you asked 26-year-old Casey if she would be standing here in front of you preaching without a script, which I never thought I would do, if she thought she would be here, she would have laughed you out of the room. That little grumpy punk rock girl who was in so much pain would have said, absolutely not. But I was encouraged by the right people in the right ways, with love and compassion and kindness in their hearts, to just consider what the opportunities were. Now, this is a whole lot about me, and those of you who don't know me learned a lot really quickly. But I don't bring this to you today because it's all about me. I bring it to you today because I know this community, this beloved community that I have so much love for, is in still a time of transition. There are so many new faces that were not here when I was here 3 years ago. You have a new minister. You have new leadership. You have new lay leadership. You have a new director of religious exploration. Well, that's what we call it at Summit. There is so much possibility. Everyone close your eyes for a second, because I'm going to not let you all rat each other out. Close your eyes, close your eyes, close your eyes, close your eyes. If you have been nervous about Summit in the last year, raise your hand. Summit, I'm sorry, Tapestry. Sorry, I say the same word to everybody for like weeks on end. This is why I have your eyes closed. Okay, that's okay. Okay, you can put your hands down and open your eyes now. Change is scary, right? No one likes change. No one goes, I'm going to change a job today, because that sounds like fun. I'm going to go back to school today, because I just want to learn something new. I'm going to change this major relationship in my life. I also preach with a body mic, so sorry. I'm going to change these things just for fun. Almost nobody does that, because we like certainty. We like knowing what's happening next. We heard that in one of the pieces we read today, the both and. I want to know what's happening next. I want to know what's predictable. And it's not just that Tapestry is in a time of transition. I don't know if any of you watched the news this morning. That's kind of where we are in general, as a country, as a global population. Every single day there's something changing so quickly that we can't even take a breath to hold on. When we come into these places together, with all of our anxieties, all of our fears, all of our hopes and dreams, and we wander together in these spaces faithfully, knowing that we might not get it right, knowing that we might misstep along the way, knowing that we might hurt each other, but we always come back together in love. That is how we get through these times of liminality. I can't say that I'm speaking for all of you. I know I can speak for myself and quite a few of the people I serve. We wake up every day and go, oh God, what next? Oh God, what next? We are in a really interesting time. You folks here at Tapestry, us as Californians with a general election on the horizon, us as Americans, us as a global society, there is so much potential and possibility, but it's not going to happen easy. We're not able to just look at each other and say, that's the next best move. We have to be willing to sit in these spaces together faithfully, with compassion and care. Ask each other those really hard questions. Ask ourselves those hard questions. Be willing to share them vulnerably, and knowing that tenderness is part of what guides us. You don't come to church on a Sunday because you're bored. You come to church on a Sunday because something is calling your soul here. And it is not by mistake that any of you are in this room today. You are all exactly, I think, for as wooey as it might sound, exactly where Spirit wants you to be. This is the place that you can do the best work. This is where you can grow the best for yourself. This is where you can best grow for your families. This is how we come together and do the good work out in the world that we know has to keep happening. Because we can't turn a blind eye to what's happening at places like Delaney. We can't turn a blind eye to the Islamic Center in San Diego. We come to these spaces together and ask these questions together and hold them together because it matters. We know there are people trying to take things away from us every single day. But when we are in communities like this, that don't shy away from change, but that embrace it, even in all of its sticky, amorphous, times, this is where magic happens. And it happens because you allow yourselves the opportunity to be here. So when I tell you we should be exploring spiritual curiosity, because that sounds super fun, what I'm asking you to do is to really dig deep inside you. Think about those wonderings, even the ones you've never told anyone and maybe never will. Think about those things that you want for you, that you want for this community, and how you want to show up in the world. Because that's one thing about Unitarian Universalism that I really do think is revolutionary. We are a life-giving, life-saving faith, in part because we are encouraged to come together in places like this and ask those questions. It's part of how our faith functions. We use reason and justice in our faith work. We already know it's part of how our UU forebears wanted us to function, and we get the opportunity to hold those truths and find new ways forward together. And how wonderful that no one's going to look at us and say, that idea is silly. That idea isn't going to work. On our best days, we come into places like this with each other and our full hearts and say, okay, what would it look like if? And we can be spiritually curious together if we give ourselves the space and the opportunity to do so. So may it be, and amen.